Hey, good afternoon. My name's Charlie Buckley, and I am here today doing the Community Parent radio show on Flint Talk Radio. And um, my partner in crime, Sam, isn't able to be with us today, but there's a lot that's been happening in the field of addiction and recovery lately. You cannot open up a newspaper, turn on a radio show, turn on a TV show, watch a movie where there's not something referenced. Yet it is still, for the most part, a taboo topic. And I feel that one of the biggest missions that Community Parent has is the education and awareness. And the more that we speak about this disease and bring it to the table and make it a topic of conversation, the better off we're all going to be. Um, there's been a lot of criticism back and forth with celebrities. This person is in recovery and they're not vocal. Or this person went into treatment and they went into treatment, at 4 o'clock in the morning so the paparazzi wouldn't see them enter. And it's important to understand that this journey is a personal journey for everybody that's involved. And if they don't choose to share it, that's their choice. However, because of the presence that they have in the media, they can, in many ways, go a lot farther, quicker to a broader audience than we can. And if you look at the names of the folks that are in recovery, in long-term recovery, I mean, so often we hear about the Philip Seymour Hoffmans and the Heath Ledgers and the Whitney Houstons and those type of tragedies, and they are tragedies. There's no doubt about it. But then there are so many success stories. Anthony Hopkins, Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal and just a bunch of different movies, or I guess we should call him Sir Anthony Hopkins. But he's been sober now for I think 32 years. The Robert Downey Jr.'s, and now Robert Downey Jr.'s son just was arrested for cocaine possession. And the thing that I give a lot of credit to Robert Downey Jr. for in that case is he came right out and said, "We're getting him help. This is a disease. He's obviously has the genetic component, and he's not backing away from the controversy around that."
I thought that was very healthy. I mean, that he did that. I think that he kind of basically offset any potential for people saying, well, look at this rich, famous guy's kid doing this too. Well,
Yeah.
he said, I did it too. I mean, he's trying. I think he draws himself into it. I think he did exactly what I would have done if I
Sure.
was a parent. I mean, what are you going to do? Allow your kid to get blisteringly criticized for something you've done and millions of other people have done? I mean,
Right.
it's absurd.
Well, that's John. That's funny. It's one of the things that I think that as a society, especially with people that are in the public eye, the paparazzis chasing them around, and people can say, "Oh my God, look at that person! He's a train wreck, or she's a train wreck," and meanwhile they're doing that while they're sitting on their couch, drinking their 6-pack of beer, thinking it's only a 6-pack of beer, and yeah, I drink it every night, but there's a fine line between Saturday night and Sunday morning.
I grew up with guys who drank every day. I mean, drink every day. Or the guy across the street from me, for example, he'd wait till he got home. He'd drink a 6-pack. You continue that. He's still living. The guy's still
Sure.
living. And so, I mean, let's face it. A lot of people are just going to live with this kind of. It doesn't ever seem to get out of hand. They're not all
Sure.
drunk driving. They're not beating their spouse, their kids, or anything. So, basically, I mean, I don't know though. I mean, from a person who has gone through rehab, what would you say to a person? Would you really chide them or try to push them into, to go into rehab if you knew this was going on, or would you just basically let them function if they are functioning within, we can say, normal realm,
Sure.
the parameters? I mean, what would you do on this case, that kind of case?
Well, it's interesting because I cruised along for 30 years, and knock on wood, never had any problems with the law, never had a DUI, never had any legal ramifications. And for me, it was something that it was lurking, and it was kind of like playing whack-a-mole. It would pop its head up, and then it would go away. It would pop its head up, and it would go away. And trying to put my success in recovery into somebody else, I think is ludicrous. If they don't want help, if they don't admit that they've got a problem, you can't convince somebody else of their problem. You can tell them stories of what they've done that they may not remember. You can show them pictures. You can show them videos. You can present all the evidence in the world, but denial is like a lead curtain. And let's also be honest, there are going to be those people that are very fortunate that can come home from work and drink a six-pack of beer or have a half a bottle or a bottle of wine, and it never goes beyond that.
I knew a guy who was a pharmacist. He was a local pharmacist. The guy was a great person. He went home at night. He'd have a six-pack of beer. He'd go crack that open. This guy's professional. He's a
Sure.
pharmacist. I mean, they're about on par with doctors, in my opinion. Actually, in some ways, better than
Yeah.
doctors. But he'd smoke up a fiend. He was a smoking fiend, and he drank a six-pack a night. Then he went back to bed. He got up in the morning. Very pleasant man to deal with. Never heard him go off on anybody. He just did that. That was part of his routine. And so, I mean, at some point, I mean, sometimes I wonder if our society's gone back and forth. I mean, everything's such an issue. We got to put the spotlight on it for so long. And I'm not advocating ignoring the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm not advocating that. But at what point the label will start actually becoming a problem itself? That's what I wonder where they draw that line at.
Well, again, I think it has to be looked at on an individual basis. And, I've had people come forward to me asking me to help them, doing interventions, for example. And I think that is probably, from my experience, the most helpful way of trying to show to somebody else that there is a problem that exists, that they're in denial about. Too many times you can be at an AA meeting or an NA meeting, and there are people that are there, and they're there because of the legal system. They're required to attend and get their sheet signed. And I'm not opposed to, if I'm running a meeting, I'll say, listen, if you have a sheet that needs to be signed and you don't want to be here, give it to me now. I'll sign it. You can go, because there's people that are here to save their life. There's the expression that when you go to rehab or you go to a AA or NA meeting, you're there for one of the 3 L's, your liver, your lawyer, or your lover. And if you're there because of those reasons, it doesn't really matter. It's whatever works, whatever works for you. I know people that will go to recovery. I mean, and out of the 100 inpatient beds at Brighton, when I was in, there are 4 of us that I know of. I'm not saying there aren't more, but there are 4 of us that I am aware of that are still sober, still clean and sober. I have friends of mine that have relapsed 3, 4, 5 times since they were in Brighton. I have friends of mine that relapsed the day they got out, and it doesn't mean that they are a bad individual, a weak individual. I've had people come to me after their first, second, third, fourth relapse and say, how come you're still sober? And the only thing I can tell them is what works for me. I can't, it's like trying to tell somebody about a diet or an exercise routine and say, if you do this, it's going to work. Well, what you're doing is you're sharing your experience. And that's really all we can do. Tragically, and I'm very sensitive to families and to issues as far as people who are not dealing with this in a public fashion. Because I remember sitting there and they said, there's only about 7% of you that stand a chance of long-term sobriety, long-term recovery. And you think, oh my God, that number is so low. And had what we call old timers or graybeards in the program say, if you get it on your first shot, and that is a gift, don't waste that. And I had to be reminded that today's my 10-month anniversary of being clean and sober. And it's not that I don't appreciate and I'm not grateful for every hour and every day, because I know for some people it is a tremendous struggle. From minute to minute, it's a tremendous struggle. And you can look at any chronic disease. I don't care if it's cancer, diabetes, MS, Parkinson's. Some people respond better to treatment than others. Some people with cancer, for example, they're going to respond very well to radical surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, a change in diet, a change in lifestyle. Other people, no matter what they do, they still die. And there are places now, I kind of look at rehab kind of as if you've seen those late night commercials for Cancer Treatment Centers of America, where that's all they do is cancer. And they take a holistic approach and they say, listen, it's going to be your lifestyle, your diet, it's meditation, it's prayer, it's acupuncture, it could be chemotherapy, it could be radiation, it could be surgery. It's not a one size fits all model. I remember sitting there, and in those very, very early days in rehab, and some of the things that they pounded into our head is 90 meetings in 90 days. Go to a meeting the day you get out. If you do, that vastly improves your chances of long-term recovery. And for a variety of reasons, in my first 90 days, I went to 125 meetings. And now, there are some weeks where I go to 5 meetings. There are some weeks I go to 3. There are some weeks I go to 1. I like going. What I've found is, knock on wood, in the last 8 or 9 months, once I got past that 90 days, I still continue to go every day for a while, but I'd say really in the last 7 months, when I go more often because I'm looking forward to seeing so-and-so. I haven't seen so-and-so at a meeting. I want to see how he or she is doing, make sure they're okay. These people are my friends. It is a fellowship. I have not yet had the need to go where I've said I need to go or I'm going to pick up a drink. I also have 3 sponsors. I have 3 different sponsors in 3 different areas of the states that I can call 24 hours a day. And typically when I call them, I'm not calling them because I feel, again, the need to drink. I'm calling them because there's something bothering me. And, we are also taught that acceptance is the key. And acceptance, a couple of different words. Acceptance and serenity were words that I never really pondered, comprehended prior to this journey. I knew what Webster's would say, what the definition of those two words were. But, we're taught that if we find a person, place, or thing unacceptable to us or bothersome, that acceptance is the key. Because if you go back to the serenity prayer, the very first thing is, God grant me the serenity to accept. And it all builds off of that, because no matter what's going on in your life, you either have the opportunity, you can change it, or you can't change it. You're either in control or you're not in control of that person, place, or thing. And when you can accept the fact that, no matter what I say and do today, John or Jane Doe, Flint or Detroit, or this law or that law is still going to happen, well, all of a sudden, your blood pressure doesn't go crazy. Now, there are still things that I find unacceptable and that I want to work to change. I think that what's going on with our legal system in many ways is unacceptable. What's going on with our healthcare system, what's going on with our political structure, what's going on in the world, but I can only change things, you could say one act of random kindness at a time, or I don't have to go to Africa to save the world. I could help somebody, I could help a neighbor, and hopefully they'll pay it forward. But, acceptance is so critical. It's so critical. Oh, I lost you.
You think so? There seems to be such a huge surge of people who are going through rehab. It seems like if you want to look at it as a business model, it's booming.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's important, because I think, we are chipping away at the stigma. We're not hitting it with dynamite yet.
But here's the thing: is and I hate to bring this up, but I mean, it's like I think that sometimes the stigma was a motivating factor to not to go back into those same behaviors. So I mean, there's like we can be accepting of a problem, but after a while, they'd be no longer a problem. And if it's genuinely a problem, just to have somebody saying, "Well, you just breathe easier," it's no, you're not getting judged. To me, it's like some ways. I mean, I've never went through rehab or anything, so I don't want to sound like I'm being judgmental. But in some ways, you gotta. I think that the element of being maybe scorned or rejected keeps people in line. I mean, I think that's a good thing in many instances.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, accountability is critical. For everything that we do in life, there are ramifications, good and or bad. And I can look and say that I could very easily, just driving from my house to here today, I passed, oh God, I don't know, 1,000 places that sold booze. I mean,
yours was booze and pills.
Yes, yeah.
You had like a dual addiction.
Yeah, mine actually, started out with with pain issues, and I still deal with those today. I'm just dealing with them holistically, non-pharmacologically, or, non-prescription medicines, and that led into a bigger problem with alcohol and mixing the two, but then again, I drove by, how many doctors, I mean, there's no shortage of doctors that are willing to write you a script if that's what you want. There's no shortage of pharmacies, and there's no shortage of obtaining those items on the black market. What it comes down to is if I look at my life today, and I look at my life a year ago today, I had just gotten released from the CICU, had just gone to a step-down room at Genesis. After being in the CICU for 18 days, almost 3 weeks, having my last rites read to me, the whole bit, and I still didn't think that I had a problem. It took me it took me from July 10th until September 30th before I said, okay, I surrender. I don't submit, I surrender. And that's another thing. People will say, oh, and I had a problem with that. I thought that was weakness. Well, submission, I now view as a weakness, but surrender is a calculated decision. It's a choice. You're choosing to surrender versus being forced to submit. So.
Everything's like, but now could you imagine, see, I've read research, and they say people who have like a faith-based program or a faith-based idea seem to have like a 40%, I've seen one time, a 40% greater chance of recovery.
Well,
and I think that's significant. I mean, scientifically, I think that's a significant factor. Not factor, but, indication that there's something might be a cause. There might be a causal relationship, or it might be there's a high relationship between this and that. As the element of faith goes up, the potential for recovery increases dramatically, in my opinion. 40% chance of greater. I mean, let's face it. Somebody says, well, that 50% chance you had of survival. Now it's 40% better. Well,
right.
That's 90%. I mean, that's better than most of us get up in the morning have.
Sure.
So,
I think that for me, the faith component, the spirituality component is critical. For everybody that I know that has maintained long-term sobriety, whether you want to be vocal about it or not, the faith and spirituality component is critical. And I think one of the times that becomes an issue is too many people, and I was guilty of this, equate religion with spirituality or religion with faith. And they're not the same thing. I don't care whether you're Catholic or Protestant or Jewish or Muslim or Buddhist or pagan. The belief in a higher power. And personally, to me, I have a hard time saying the higher power because for me that's God. But there is a solution to this chronic disease. And I'm not saying that Western medicine doesn't play a part in that. But I think you have to look at the disease as a whole and then as a treatment as a whole. You've got your mind, your body, and your spirit or your soul. And you've got to treat all three. You've got to be aware of all three. People will talk about, there's some great movies out right now. God's Not Dead, Heaven is for Real, all these different movies. And, people say to me, well, prove that there's a God. And I say, prove that there isn't. It becomes knowledge versus faith. At some point, you have to take a leap of faith.
Even people engaging in scientific endeavors have a faith that they could find something different or new, a new approach, new information. They have a faith in the unknown.
Sure.
I mean, to some degree, it's a faith unknown. I mean, I can see problems with the dogmatic statements of what God is or isn't, the negation of what he, or the affirmation of all that stuff. I mean, I can see the problems with that. But to say that, I just have a hard time believing that something just all of a sudden stimulated, boom, the world is here.
Right.
Boom, everything, and then all this material just started organizing his life on itself. I mean, I just have a hard time putting my mind around that. It's a possibility. I'll agree with that. But the simple fact is, I remember one time a few years ago, there was an aspirin commercial on, and there it goes. So we're not going to bore you with studies and stuff like that. Talk about what the ratio of people using this and found benefit from it. Basically, I took it and it worked. Well, the thing is, when I'm when I have an issue, I pray about it, I concentrate upon it like that, and there's some resolution. Now, that could happen to a person who's totally materialistic, a total out-and-out atheist. That could also happen. I mean, maybe, they won't be doing this stuff about prayer and stuff, but it just seems that, to the idea that everything just came together, and now we can now our gray matter organize itself so we can make somewhat sense about it, and we can say there's somewhat sense about it because we can say in the main, we can agree something's going outside. Now, the nuances of how different it is from your perception of it to mine, we would never be able to fully comprehend because A, would have an inadequate language and all that stuff. So, but to me, for the idea to say everything's just organized on its own, that even we could actually have this ability to question our existence and have these camps of yay or nay about this deity or whatever, to me is a remarkable statement that something organized, something pushed to give it the nudge. So, I have an issue with that, but I just simply look at the fact that, in some circles they call like Freud would say, basically, belief in God is a desire for wish fulfillment and stuff like that. Well, if it seems to be working on a large scale,
right?
Okay, then what do we base all of our faith, if you want, in science or medicine or whatever? It's because we've seen repeated times, you can never some of the true skeptics will say, you can never show a true example of causal relationships are awfully hard to demonstrate. This causes this. There's a higher chances of this happening after this happens, but a total, one-on-one relationship with this happening is really hard to prove.
Sure.
So, basically that skepticism right there, I can use that as, some people say they can use that to dismiss God, the idea of God, and I say I can use that as the ability to dismiss your argument against God, because you cannot prove to me that it didn't happen because of this or this or this, for the same reason, this instrument of skepticism, and trying to isolate the incidents and see how much of an effect they did have upon the other next incident, So I just simply look at the fact that people who have a faith in some kind of higher power, God, and I don't like using higher power because I don't like that Zen crap. I grew up as a Christian. I'm not going to go around saying, oh, the other type. No.
Right.
It's an adequate term, but so is a higher power. To me, or even the word spirituality. To me, it's like, what the hell does that really mean?
Right.
Okay, if you're an atheist but you believe in spirituality, what does that mean? If you're saying there's no God, then you're just saying, so basically you're a dysfunctioning organism that's going to die off, and there's nothing else there. Now, you might have a personality. I'll allow for the word personality or ego or whatever, but to say spirituality in connection with you being, also proclamation of being an atheist, I really question the use of that term.
Sure. It's the scientists want to point to the great scientific minds, and they'll, now one of the greatest scientific minds of our age is, Stephen Hawking, but even these are theories that he has because he cannot prove them scientifically. Well, it's the same thing that, you can't disprove the theories that we have. So how can you tell me that we Christians or we who believe in a higher power or God are wrong? The Big Bang. Well, how does something come from nothing? if there was nothing there, how does something happen? And where I have a hard time are with people that'll take, I don't care if it's the Bible or the Quran or any written text, and they want to translate something literally that was, in my opinion, never meant to be literal. These were, even Jesus spoke in parables. He used stories to get a message across. And people will say, well, the Bible says, well, all right, yeah, the Bible. I think it's an important book, but I don't think it's the be-all and end-all, because what books are in the Bible and what books are not in the Bible? Well, they were decided by a former pagan ruler, and there's a reason we celebrate Christmas when we do. I don't think that Jesus was born on December 25th. That fell in line with a pagan holiday. Same thing with Easter. So what they were trying to do was convert pagans to Christianity by keeping things familiar. So if we already celebrate a certain holiday on a certain time of year, well, let's meld the two together. And then what about the books that are not in the Bible, the Gnostic Gospels? And there are so many arguments, and on one hand, I'll have people that'll support me because of my faith or my spirituality or my religious convictions, but then they also want to turn around and just kill me because I'm not afraid to think. And I give so much credit to the Jesuits. I remember, and those were my educators, and they said, accept nothing, question everything. God gave you the ability to question. And I'm not going to go into whether he was or whether he wasn't, but I remember a priest that I had as an instructor in high school, Father Bonowitz, born as a Orthodox Jew, converted to Christianity. His parents held a funeral, never spoke to him again, disowned him. And he said to the class one day, and I'll never forget, this is 35 years ago or 40 years ago, and he said, was Jesus married? And man, people went crazy. I mean, people went ballistic. And he said, the things that are mentioned in the Bible are things that were extraordinary. Well, it never says that he wasn't. And for a male Jew in his time to be 30 years old, if he wasn't married, that would have been extraordinary and it would have been mentioned. He wasn't saying that he was or wasn't. He's just saying, think. Does it make him any less of our Savior if he was married? So, again, I'm not proposing that he was or that he wasn't. I don't even want to get into that debate. But people want to get into God created, the heavens and the earth in 7 days. Well, what's a day to God? Is it 24 hours? I don't think so.
Well, actually, it says in the Bible, it says a day for us is like 1,000 years to God is like it's like vice versa. It's like, to
Right.
us, 1,000 years, and God is like a day.
Right.
Because time is irrelevant to a person who has no timetable to keep. He doesn't worry about the hourglass shifting into his disfavor. He's going to always exist. So, if you're living outside of time, that's
Right.
the key to understand it, outside of time. Because let's face it, we put measures on it because it has value. That's the reason why I think the reason why we put measurements on time. Because we have a finite amount of them.
Well, then you have the whole issue with numerology in the Bible. Well, you have the number 6 and the number 7 and 3 6s or 3 7s or 12 this or 12 that, or how many loaves and how many fishes. Well, let's figure this out. You have 12 tribes of Israel. All right, you have 10 commandments. You have the number of the beast. You have the perfect number. You have 7 days in a week. There was resurrection occurred after 3 days. There's, so and so lived to be. I took your Facebook Bible quiz last night that you had posted, John, and I got some type of scholar as well, and they're talking about who lived to be 969 years old, and the point of that isn't that somebody really lived to be 969 years old, but he lived a long life, and there is so much lost, in my opinion, in the efforts to literally translate the written word, where they're focusing on the words and they're forgetting the message. So, I think it's absolutely critical that we have a spiritual component. I mean, if you're going to ask me why I am still sober, I'm going to tell you it's Western medicine, it's Eastern medicine, and it's spirituality. Spirituality for me, my relationship with God, is the key. And these are all things that we need to bring out into the open. You know, recently, you know, this week, we lost somebody, you know, a quote unquote member of the family, you know, our greater community, 16 years old. And, you know, we've lost 16-year-olds all around the country this week to this disease of addiction. And it's a tragedy and it's a shame. Is it any less a shame to lose somebody that's 20 years old or 30 years old or 40 years old? Is it any less a tragedy? No, the tragedy is ignoring it, in my opinion. The tragedy is not speaking about it. The tragedy is making somebody afraid to ask for help because of what they feel or what they fear the backlash is going to be. As soon as we can bring this discussion to the table and talk about it openly, it brings education and awareness, which is that first step. So, you know, what to circle back around to your question about the spiritual component. You know, Western medicine, Eastern medicine, and spirituality, those are the foundations. But if you ask me what the foundation, what the bedrock of recovery and long-term sobriety is, it is spirituality.
I think the very idea that you value human life enough to actually want to treat something that could be detrimental to them is all a form of spirituality.
Sure.
Because, I mean, let's face it, if we are totally just animals and we're going to die off, very few people, maybe vets or something like that, but in some of these real wacko PETA people, but let's face it, I mean, I think there's a spiritual or a potential for a spiritual component in almost everything we engage in, because if we're totally caught up in this, or if you just embrace the materialistic position, that's it. What you see is what you get. You have to live with the here and now. And then there would probably be no real impetus to actually do damn near anything.
No, I mean, you know, you can look at the good and the bad of corporate America, corporate greed, corporate structure. But you know, this thing with Hobby Lobby, and, you know, everybody wants to get up in arms about, is a corporation now a person? Andrew Heller has been very vocal in the Flint Journal as of late about, you know, with his opinions. And look at Bill and Melinda Gates. You know, look at what they're doing with their wealth. You know, you get to a point, you know, as a child of the 80s, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. I said, I was a senior in college in October of 87. I had every intention from the moment I walked into school that I was going to be a stockbroker. You know, I grew up in Connecticut. I was going to get on the train every day, go down into New York City like all the other lemmings, and that's what I was going to do. And then all of a sudden, 90% of the stockbrokers in New York were now taking your lunch order, taking your dinner order, because the financial market imploded. And if you look at that 80s mentality about, you know, the Gordon Gekko, greed is good. You know, how many boats can you sail at the same time? How many houses can you live in at the same time? How many cars can you drive at the same time? Am I a fan of redistribution of wealth? Hell no. You know, if you earn it, you should keep it, and you should have the decision of what you want to do with it.
See, I believe in the wealth that's got to be created, because let's face it, you can't be generous if you're a poor person yourself.
Absolutely.
Let's face it. I mean, another thing is too, we all enjoy. I mean, it's a side issue for when we're talking about addiction, but I guess there is an addiction to material gain.
Oh my God, yeah. Oh.
But I mean, greed is good in a way, because guess what? Our whole system, everybody's whining about no job creation. And that's all tied to, let's face it, you don't have a job, a lot of people get depressed, they start using some sort of substance and abuse. So it all spirals downhill. If you don't have people out there greedily seeking out something for their own betterment. I mean, I'm sorry, there's no way that's abundance that we don't bounce about it. We don't do stuff because it's public-minded and, you know, it's good for the country overall. We do it, and guess what? There's like a desire to the jobs are created, not because, say, hey, you know, nobody sits around saying, I want to create a corporation that employs people at $75,000 a year with a benefits package that's extraordinary, because I just want to employ people. No, they start out pursuing the money with the goods or services they're offering, and they have to employ people to be able to to A, get it carried out, and B, like Henry Ford realized, hey, if I pay these people more, they'll be able to be potential customers.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, guess what? I hate to bring this to these little whiny people out there who think that we should all live and join hands and sing Kumbaya, but that wears real thin really damn quick. Especially when you got a multi-ethnic, multi-diversified, peoples and everything always in flux in this country. What the hell's going to hold us together? Because
Sure.
let's face it, they're not requiring any language requirements anymore. They give forms out for government assistance in all these other languages. So what is the pursuit of it? What's one thing is about it is everybody comes here for the economic possibilities. And if you don't have economic possibilities, all these people who are here for it are now going to be on the system, which is already overload. So I mean, it's all tied to, and that causes drug addiction. It causes, substance abuses of all sorts. It causes family relationships to be strained. So I don't see how they can get off this merry-go-round. I really can't. I mean, it basically, you always got to keep some kind of product out there that somebody wants to buy, and that company's not on top. I mean, it's always fluctuating. I mean, I'm glad you never entered because you'd probably be still abusing, but you'd be using something different, and you
Sure.
wouldn't even care if you were, because you'd have the income coming in.
Yep.
So that'd be detrimental to you. So I think that this whole idea of I see everything tied together. I see a lot of stuff, everything in the world that can be. You can make a connection to almost everything, all the disciplines, all the subject matter. Let's face it, they have threads attached to them.
Well, I think you just brought up a very key point, John. Trying to take any issue and say that this is the issue, this is the only issue, it doesn't have any cause and effect on anything else, that's self-defeatist. You can take any social issue, any governmental issue, any health issue, anything, and you can very rapidly draw the connections. If you look back at, actually, I remember one of the lines from the movie with Tom Hanks, Captain Phillips, what the story about the Maersk, Alabama, when he's talking to the Somali pirate, and he says, "You don't have to do this. You don't have to be a pirate." And he says, maybe in America I wouldn't, or maybe that's true in America. Whether we like it or not, we are a world focus. And there are so many opportunities here, and there are so many success stories that you can look back on. I look at having lived in Northeast Pennsylvania, the anthracite coal region, for a number of years. That was new to me. I grew up in an area in Connecticut where you were kind of sandwiched between farms and very, very urban areas. And you get out into that Northeast Pennsylvania area, and it's you're in the Poconos. I mean, it's rolling hills and mountains. It's very pretty. And then you turn the corner, and there's a strip mine where the earth has just been ravaged by these mining operations. But the coal companies, they had a very interesting approach to their local economy. You had the coal company that owned the land, that built the homes, that owned the stores, that brought in the doctors, that brought in the lawyers, that sustained the inhabitants of the community. And when they paid these people in money, they didn't necessarily pay them in U.S. currency. They paid them in scrip. And that scrip was then used at the store to buy your groceries, which was owned by the company. It was used to pay the doctor, who was paid by the company. It was used to go into the collection basket at the church. And without that structure, the coal companies realized that in order for these people to live, they needed housing, they needed health care, they needed education, they needed groceries, and they had a very tightly controlled monopoly on their residents. Now, ultimately, was that good? Was that the right way? No, but they realized that if we want these people to buy these goods, we've got to pay them. The same thing with as you were referencing with Henry Ford, and you can go to different parts of the country, and you've got this automotive belt here in Michigan, you've got the coal belt in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. You can go out to the further areas on the Midwest where you've got the farm belt. You've got the different flyover states where you had the, you know, the cattle. But any of these organizations, it doesn't matter whether it's a coal company, an automotive company, they realized, whether they realized it or not, that it was a social responsibility, they realized that they had to take care of their employees or they wouldn't have employees. If they didn't pay their employees, there was nobody to buy their goods. And that's part of the, we've become such a consumer-focused society. People will say, we don't make anything in America anymore. We're consumers. We are a country of consumers. It's rampant consumerism. Well, somebody's got to consume the things that are being made.
Well, and people act like that too when they make that comment. You know, they're saying like, basically they're saying, well, look at what we're doing. We're just spending. Okay, I agree. There's a lot of things that are unnecessary. Who is supposed to be the one telling what is necessary? Oh,
Right.
you? Because your values are supposed to supplant everybody else's. So basically, you got this elite screaming about that, whining about it, you know, bitching about it. But yet they have their thing. They think they buy. They're not totally. I mean, they're not living in a bare house, sleeping on the floor, and don't even have a refrigerator. Most of these people have opulence. I mean, they drive Beamers or Audis. The same type of people go around telling us about crass commercialism and crass consumerism and all this stuff. I mean, at what point are you going to say, who the hell is supposed to be the one telling other people to do it?
Right.
I mean,
Well,
you, yeah, you know.
Henry Ford said, you know, you can have this vehicle in any color you want as long as it's black. And so he made black Model A's and black Model T's, you know, the Model T, then the Model A, and they were all black. Well, there was also a reason that he made them in black. The paint dried faster, so he was able to speed up that color paint. I just found this out watching one of the stupid car shows that I watch at night. The black paint dried faster. And that's why we had all these black Model T's and A's versus gray or white or red or any other color, I guess.
People don't realize how much has been tied to the automotive industry. And how much
Oh,
of the stuff
God.
we engage daily we take for granted. Like Kingsford Edge charcoal. That was Henry Ford's brother-in-law. They had products left over, you know, wood products left over to manufacture vehicles that he actually used to use wood in them. So he used to take and found a use for all those scraps, basically. Right. And that's where we get the Kingsford Edge, you know, charcoal. I mean, all this stuff we take for granted. See, that's the reason I'm saying about people want to see, like you were saying, you can't just isolate it one
No, you
issue.
cannot.
Because there's fallout from everything. And that's look at Obamacare. Everybody said that was a great thing. Basically, it's just giving more power to these dreaded, god-awful insurance companies. They can offer any product, basically, as long as the cursory meets some kind of, you know, the requirements that Obamacare mandates is supposed to have.
Well,
And they don't have to deliver, really.
still, I think one of the pieces that people are missing and they're not talking about enough, and my personal opinion of what's really behind Obamacare, was our healthcare information was the last bit of private information that we owned. And as soon as Obamacare is enforced, now the federal government has access to the last piece of private information we had.
Now, don't think those bastards won't use that against you.
Oh, they absolutely will.
They will use that against you.
They're going to use that when they're coming up with any of their health and human service plans, as for anything from education to insurance. They're going to start being able to crunch this data and say, well, if you are a white male or a black female or an Asian male born in this area from these parents, you're going to be more apt to these type of chronic illnesses. We're going to look at basically, you know, what's the return on investment for your life?
And because basically we've been coming about it. The thing is, I don't like the politicians because at least the business person, the clear-cut businessman, has to depend on me buying the product willingly.
Right.
These guys can make us to do anything because they have the inside goods on us.
Yep.
And I mean, let's face it, I can't remember too many. Of course, corporations will do the abusive stuff, but they usually have to be in collusion with the government to get away with this stuff. And like I said, some people are going to be watching this. You're saying, how the hell does this have to do with anything with addiction and stuff? But I think that there is. I mean, let's face it, somebody who had been going through addiction and gone through recovery, you don't think that's going to be a juicy little plum they're going to be able to
Sure.
use on those people when they want to do something or not do something in their future? Those damn politicians are going to use that against you.
Absolutely. And what it comes down to, again, is education and awareness. And if you look at, you know, it's easy to say that this show is focused on recovery and addiction, on awareness, and education. That community parent is focused on our children. Well, that is all true. However, if we just take a narrow focus and just talk about one single issue every single week or every single day or every single minute, you're taking an approach that's going to miss, in my opinion, the bigger picture, because everything is related. It is, to use a different analogy, the human body. Everything depends or is related to the other. You can't do something to your foot without it affecting your hip or your back. You can't do something to your heart or your lungs without it affecting another system within the body. And we can talk any single topic for any show. We could talk about Western medicine, we could talk about Eastern medicine, we could talk about spirituality, we can talk about all the spiritual differences. We can talk about all the different approaches in Western medicine, all the different approaches in Eastern medicine. We can talk about nutrition, we can talk about exercise. We can talk and talk and talk about any topic, any situation, any issue. And we shouldn't stop talking about it. However, we cannot lose sight of the fact that this is not, you can't defeat this with a rifle shot. I think if you have a team of snipers, that's great, because each individual sniper can focus on one topic. But if we just look at this as a singular issue, we're doomed for failure. We're doomed.
Like when you're going through, when you're going through treatment for rehab, you're in rehab, they approach it basically. There are ties to everything you do. It's not your addictions are not just tied to you using this drug. That's a symptom.
It's a symptom of the disease.
Something of the disease. So that there's something like that. There's an analogy between that and what's going on in society. The economy is not something that's just so isolated. It's
Nope.
and anybody who thinks so is bizarre. If they think that's just an isolated thing, and you can just dismiss that or move on without even addressing that, then you're stupid. And I think there's you have to look at what you're talking about too, and as an individual, the addiction of itself is just a symptom of what's going on larger scale. And maybe that's where it's about. See, I always had issue with addiction being considered a disease. I thought it's a disease. I think it's a disease only that it can get progressive. If it's not addressed or it's not treated, it gets worse. But there's a huge component of volition, voluntary effort on your behalf when you first start taking that. Start doing
You have a choice.
Yeah.
You do have a choice in the beginning, but then again, there's also the camp that says, do you really have a choice, or has that choice been, for some people, predetermined, based on your family, based on society, based on things? I mean, I could say that I'm a Catholic because I was born into a Catholic family. Now you get to a point in time where you can then make the choice to stay within the Catholic Church, to leave the Catholic Church, to become a pagan, a Buddhist, a Muslim, a Jew, whatever. But there are certain things that we have to recognize that it fits the disease definition of the American Medical Association, that there is all the components that every other chronic disease has. However, I don't like to say that alcoholism is a disease. What I like to say is the disease is addiction. That's the disease. The symptoms of it may be alcoholism, may be drug addiction, it may be sex addiction, pornography addiction, gambling addiction, shopping addiction. The disease is addiction. The symptoms are going to manifest themselves in any different way. There are people that are, workaholics. There are people that are exerciseaholics. There are people, you can add the holic to just about any behavior, because anything that's taken to an extreme becomes detrimental.
Well, like the word religion, actually somebody told me the other day, and I got to look it up, but he said the definition he found is to put it into bondage. That's where so people can exercise religiously. They can vote religiously. They can engage in political activity religiously. I mean, anything that's actually you basically do on a almost like a forced regularity. it's like it's considered religious. So, and the same thing with addiction. I mean, it could. I mean, it's. I know people who. That's what becomes. I think that's tied to OCD. You know, obsessive compulsive disorder. I think some people. That's a form. Those things are all indications of something. Those are an indication. I think something deeper.
Right. Well, what it boils down to is the disease of addiction is a brain disease. It all occurs, right between here. And untreated, it can kill you. No doubt about it. So if you develop the disease, you need to treat the disease. How do you treat the disease? Western medicine, Eastern medicine, spirituality. Those are the three components of treatment. The actual form of treatment is going to vary by individual, but this disease affects 23 million Americans directly. What you will see very rapidly is that 23 million, we touch everybody else because we're either your employer, your employee, your son, your daughter, your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, your cousin, your aunt, your uncle. It doesn't stop. At some point, it's going to touch you. So if we can bring this issue out into the open, have a discussion, an open-minded discussion where you can share ideas without being criticized. You can criticize my conclusions based on how I got there, but you can't criticize my thoughts, my feelings, my opinions, my emotions, because they're mine. I can't tell you what you think. I can't tell you what you feel. I want to listen to you. I want to know why you feel the way you feel or think the way you feel. And many times after listening to that with open-minded discussion, my opinions will change. There's very little that's set in stone. I used to be such a black and white person. It was, it's this or it's that. Man, there are so much gray areas in life, and that was really hard to accept. But it's the truth. Everything's not black and white. Everything's not just right or wrong. But we have to keep discussing it. We have to keep talking about it. We have to make our children comfortable to the point where they can talk to us or talk to somebody about it without fear of being rebuked or criticized or condemned, because silence will absolutely kill you. Silence will kill you.
I agree, because I think some people just don't want to address this because there's a maybe kind of a stigma they think that even talking about it is going to impart upon the family, because if you're admitting your family's past and you're saying to your kid you're addressing, maybe you see them starting to engage in behavior it might lead to other negative behaviors, you're admitting to something in the past for your family that
Sure.
you may consider like the something like a skeleton in the closet. For example, when I was a kid, my mom and my family actually had this kind of aversion to. My dad was an epileptic, and we couldn't discuss him being epileptic and when I was a kid, at first I thought there was something wrong with my dad. And there was. There was a physical.
Sure, suffer from epilepsy.
But there was a stigma my mom attached to it. My mom attached the stigma to it and made it seem like it was something in his control, and it's something she was embarrassed by.
Yeah.
And she's been gone for a long time, and I still have issues with her saying what she did about it and mimicking him. She used to mimic him going through attack.
Oh.
Until I got like a junior high, and I started looking up what epilepsy was. Then I was angry as hell at her for having that attitude towards my dad's condition in his life,
Right.
And it's a medical condition, and he was on medications for it. It wasn't something that it wasn't an emotional issue that he tried to use it as a battering ram or as a weapon.
Right.
And she used to use that to humiliate him.
Yeah.
It's like, and that wasn't that was totally beyond his control. It had no volition whatsoever on this, and she still used it. And that's aired dirty laundry in my family. But it's like, to me, it still bothers me that she did this because she kept us she made my sister and I very ashamed of our dad.
Right.
For a long time.
Well, I had a teacher in high school, is a track coach that suffered from epilepsy, and we all wondered why he didn't drive. How come his wife was dropping him off at school and picking him up from school every day? Well, then he told us, and it was like, well, what the hell is epilepsy? You know what I mean? Because you didn't really hear about it. You heard somebody had a seizure, but you didn't know why or what caused it or anything else. So again, education and awareness, bringing it out of the closet. There was a great TED speaker who was talking about the fact that she was a lesbian and she was a waitress, and she was getting asked by, it was always the little kids, are you a boy or are you a girl? And her whole presentation at the TED conference wasn't about homosexuality. It was about coming out of the closet, and that the closet didn't have to be homosexuality. It could be alcoholism. It could be suicide in it could be anything that you're trying so desperately to oppress or repress or hide or deny that it exists. And any of those topics, once we talk about them, we're better off for it. And our children are better off for it. When I say our children, I'm talking about the next generation is better off for it.
I know very little that actually does better by keeping it under wraps. No, I don't think you should be like exploitive. I don't think you should
Nope.
use it for titillation purposes. But I mean, it's like that kind of stuff you're talking about. It's like, yeah, I mean, medical illnesses. Yeah, I can understand having some of the things you want to keep wrapped up. I mean, I can understand. I believe people have rights to privacy, but sometimes at some point it's going to come to the head. You know, that's going to
Right.
come to light, and that's going to be just harder for people to deal with.
Yep.
I mean, it's going to be harder for you to deal with. But yeah, I mean, epilepsy could be very rough. I mean, it could be like some people. My dad, had no issue with the driving, but he had it sporadically. But I mean, some people have uncontrollable seizures or very strong ones that happen pretty regularly.
Yeah, those
So-
the grand mal seizures.
Yeah,
And
my
yeah.
dad had grand mal, would have grand mal, and that was pretty scary to see him go through that as a kid.
Yeah.
I've seen it like 4 or 5 times. But he from the sometimes the late 70s, early 80s, and to like actually his late 70s till the day he died in 2005, he hadn't had one. So somehow that basically got totally under control. Or if he did have one, I tell you what, I never heard about it or never seen it.
Right.
But yeah, it's just something like that. I mean, it's like, and it was awfully hard to, come to grips with that as a kid, because back then you didn't talk about it, especially when you're under basically this huge, admonishment by your mom not to discuss this.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, there's only 1 or 2 people in the family, outside the family, was aware of it, and that's because we told my mom to let them in on it because they might be around and she might need their help with it. If the seizure happened again. So because they were pretty dramatic, they're pretty violent, violent seizures. But I don't. There's nothing really that does well by being put into a pressure cooker of emotions. There's very little that does well with that. I don't think of anything, but.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're running short on time, and just to wrap things up and kind of bring us back on focus and on topic, the disease is addiction. The symptom of that disease can manifest itself in a variety of ways. The key to treating this chronic disease is a 3-legged stool. It's Western medicine, Eastern medicine, and spirituality. And education and awareness is critical. We need to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. We need to be comfortable talking about an uncomfortable topic until it's no longer an uncomfortable topic. We may not want to talk about cancer in our family, but when somebody has cancer, we can talk about it. We may not want to talk about any issue, but the more we talk about it, the less of an issue it becomes. So, we just ask you to join us in the fight for education and awareness. Let's not lose people that we don't need to lose. There is a solution. There absolutely is a solution. So thank you very much. Thanks, John.